What is going to happen to Utah? Is the Big 12 or Pac-12 going to be their future conference in 2024 and beyond? We're talking about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. My name is JT Wistcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. This is your first time listening to us. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. We'd love to interact with you guys in the comments. And on today's show, we're going to be talking all things conference realignment. So we have to talk about. I mean, with all the news and everything that's been coming out, it's a crazy world we live in, and the Utah Utes have been extremely impacted by it. And it seems like I am recording this Thursday, August 3rd at 10:55 p.m. Mountain Time. So even by the time I waited as long as I could, guys. I got to get to bed at a decent hour still with some stuff I got going on tomorrow. I thought about I was like, should I pull an all-nighter just in case something comes out? But at the end of the day, I was like, I'm sorry if this is dated by the time you listen to this, because by the time you look at this, Arizona could officially be in the Big 12. At this moment, Arizona has an invite to the Big 12, is what's been reported. And it seems more than likely that they're going to join the Big 12. I mean, let's just repeat Thamel's report, right? Arizona's in deep discussion with the Big 12 about joining the league. Some finalities expected in the near future, as there's an Arizona Board of Regents meeting scheduled later tonight. And it, like I said, everything we've heard makes it sound like that Board of Regents meeting is going to eventually end in Arizona joining the Big 12. We know the Big 12 all of the presidents in the Big 12 have officially approved adding Arizona, but we do not know if Arizona has for sure said yes. As I said, I expect this to happen. This should be what happened by the time you're listening to this. It very well could have happened, but nothing is final at the time of this recording. And since nothing is final, I thought we could play out all the different scenarios that could happen between now and potentially the next time I talk to you, which could be Saturday, because I'm thinking about doing a Saturday show again with all the craziness we had. And it performed very well last week. So thank you for you guys for helping make that happen. But if not, talk about it Monday as well, because this could drag into Sunday. We might not hear till Monday, but it does sound like that Utah is going to be forced to make a decision here very soon, and very, very, very soon. Emphasis on the very. By the time you're listening to this, Utah could have already had that. There's going to be a Pac-12 meeting tomorrow. Any last ditch effort at a deal sounds like it's going to be made. And after that, I would expect Utah to make their decision with everything they kind of have weighed out and figure out if they think the best path for them forward is the Big 12 or the Pac-12. Look, I've mentioned before, I would like to see Utah stay in the Pac-12 for the simple fact of just the football aspect, right? Financially speaking, the Big 12 is going to be the better option for Utah. All that talk of the Pac-12 being able to beat the Big 12's offer was just not true. And look, eventually, if some crazy subscription scenario thing comes to fruition, then yes, I guess, and eventually that would be true. But the truth of the matter is, it's not going to happen. But like I said, I just like Utah's access to the college football playoff. I've said it before, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Maybe Utah could go over and have that instant success in the Big 12, but it's still a change. Lots of things can happen. I just still think what's best for Utah is staying in the Pac-12. And call me a traditionalist, I just like 5 power conference. I like having 5 Power 5 conferences. I've liked the Pac-12. I've enjoyed watching the Pac-12, having the teams play each other. I will, if Utah did move to the Big 12, I would very quickly get used to those new teams, and I'd have a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed watching a Baylor. I think Kansas from the basketball aspect, although obviously Utah can't rival Kansas in basketball, but there's tons of really great programs in the Big 12. I'm just someone who has always been like, man, I love playing in the Pac-12. I think that's just where Utah and where the other schools in the past have belonged, but we don't live in that world anymore. So Mark Harlan, President Randall, and everyone else attached to Utah just has to make the best decision for the university going forward. And they have to throw kind of the stuff I just mentioned, like the bias and the love of the Pac-12 is what we talked about with Bill Riley a little bit yesterday. Utah and all these schools wanted to stay in the Pac-12, right? But just get to a point where financially you just can't justify that $10 million. And that's where it seems like we could be at for Utah. I do think there's some situations that, as I'm going to dive into, where I do think you could potentially get past that $10 million thing. Like you'd be okay without it. But I mean, when you talk about the Utah team that from their media rights deal is already making 30 million, right? That's where it's hard to then all of a sudden take 20 million. And it's just a very complicated situation. So let's dive into those scenarios I mentioned. The first one is that Arizona and Arizona State go to the Big 12 while Oregon and Washington go to the Big 10. So diving into the reports, as we mentioned, it seems more that barring a for those of you NBA fans, when DeAndre Jordan signed with the Dallas Mavericks all those years ago, and at the very last second, the Clippers swooped in and were able to bring him back to their organization. Barring anything like that, Arizona's going. Arizona State's interesting. We've heard a lot of conflicting reports, but it does, like I said, if we had to guess, it does feel like this could very well end in Arizona State going there. But just going with the scenario again, so let's say Arizona State go, and then it seems likely that Oregon and Washington are going to the Big Ten. Then this is the biggest layup, right? Utah absolutely should want to and will go to the Big 12 in that scenario if the offer is on the table, which everything we've heard is that the offer is on the table. And that, that's what we heard. They wanted to add the 4 corner schools. It's been the longest thing reported. It makes a lot of sense. Give the BYU-Utah rivalry would be a big boost to the Big 12, in my opinion. And I do think Utah, from a football standpoint, would help the conference out a lot. So I think in that situation I laid out, Utah would have, you can't stay in a dying Pac-12 at that point where there is no, I think the one appeal to, if let's say Arizona does leave and there's still situations we'll dive into later, like where Oregon and Washington stay, then there's some appeal in staying and being like, okay, well, you can still put together for the next couple seasons, a solid college football resume to get yourself in the college football playoff by winning the Pac-12. You get the automatic qualifier. And even if you go through your season, just have one loss, depending on how things play out in the other conferences, because wins against Arizona and Colorado, losses the past few years against those teams, have drastically hurt and affected you. Now, obviously, not many people have lost to Colorado in the recent years just based on the state of that program, but that's going to change with the Buffs improving, and Arizona's on the rise as well. But once again, like wins against Colorado and Arizona, those weren't resume builders. Like you don't lead with that on your resume. That's buried down there. It's like, oh, they took care of business against. That's what good teams are supposed to do. So once again, just going forward, I do think if you just say, can the Pac-12 lose a Colorado and an Arizona and still be like, have a strongish schedule, I would still say yes overall, because once again, what have Colorado and Arizona been? They haven't been pluses when you beat them in terms of building a strong strength of schedule at the end of the season, or a strong resume is what I should be saying. So that's where in that scenario, as I'm kind of laying out, that's why I still think if you stay, you can be like, okay, you can still put together a strong resume to make the college football playoff, because Arizona and Colorado were never boosting that in the first place. And neither is Arizona State as of recently. Although there was a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago now, Arizona State was still doing some positive things. And that could be considered a resume builder. But once again, if everyone goes, it's rumored. If Arizona goes, if Arizona State goes, if Oregon and Washington accept that really decreased rate, that $35 to $40 million rate that is being offered to them by the Big Ten, then Utah has to go. And that's where, like you said, it's Utah. It's turning down $31 million, stable conference going forward. The Pac-12 would then be completely falling apart, losing all its major brands. You have to go. Moving on to second scenario. If Arizona and Arizona State go, but as I've laid the scenario out a little bit, if Arizona and Arizona State go to the Big 12, but Oregon and Washington stay, then like I said, look, I understand the money aspect of it. And this is where President Randall, Mark Harlan, they have to do what's best for the university. As someone who's just invested in Utah football and wants what's best for the Utah football program, I just don't think it's going to be diminished the next 4 years playing in a Pac-12 without Arizona State, and Colorado. I think as long as Washington and Oregon stay and you're competing against them, you would still have strong records and still have strong consideration. As I mentioned, even if you don't win the conference, you would still be considered a top 15 conference. I just don't see how Utah staying in the Pac, at least for the next 4 years, would diminish them. Now, it doesn't seem like things are good for the Pac long-term, right? It seems like Oregon and Washington, as soon as they got that Big Ten invite, they would want to go there. But once again, I just feel like if that was the case and they left and Utah has stayed in the conference for the next 4 years and they've continued to win and build things, why are they then not an attractive option to add? So that's where, if Washington and Oregon stay, I would like to see Utah stay. But also, as I laid out, I totally understand if they want to go. I'm looking at it from a fan standpoint who likes playing Oregon and Washington each year, likes the access to the college football playoff, which is the most important thing to me. The most important thing to me as a fan is watching my school win and have success. But I also understand the money aspect, and there is a little bit of risk in staying in the Pac-12 in that regard, just with the fact that it is teetering in Oregon and Washington. The first chance they get a decent offer from the Big 10, they will be gone. So that's the risk there. But as I mentioned, I just like the access to the college football playoff. So if Oregon and Washington did decide to stay, I would like Utah to stay. But maybe Arizona State will stay too. In fact, that's actually what we're going to be diving into, some of these other scenarios in the second segment, which we're going to dive into in just 1 second. But first, I want to tell you guys a little bit more about our friends at LinkedIn Talent Solutions. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. And getting it set up and creating a free job post is super easy. You just go over and add your job to the purple hashtag hiring frame on your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. You guys can make the right choice, adding the right person to your team today on LinkedIn Jobs. In fact, LinkedIn Jobs is rated #1 by small businesses in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. No spaces, one word, all caps, Locked On College. To post your job for free, terms and conditions may apply. Alrighty, diving back into more Pac-12, Big-12 expansion craziness talk. Actually, I should say we're going to dive into that in 1 second, just because I am recording this late at night, 11:03. One more Twitter refresh to make sure nothing has changed, and it doesn't look like it at the moment. Like I said, I fully expect Arizona, based on the reports we are hearing, to join the Big 12. But also, it is not 100% finalized yet. We've heard the reports. People have said it's done. It's not. But we haven't gotten the results of the Board of Regents things. It's been stated, but it's not like done like Colorado going over there. It's supposed to get done. It's once again, it's like when an NBA free agent signs with a team, he's supposed to go there. Something can change and happen at the last minute. That's the only reason I'm prefacing what I'm saying, is because we have not heard from the Board of Regents that it's been approved that an Arizona or an Arizona State move has been happened. Let's look though at Arizona State, because we've heard that Arizona State, there's been multiple conflicting reports about them, right? Will they stay? Will they go? I do think once again, this really, it all comes down to what Oregon and Washington do for me, because Oregon and Washington right now are the powerhouses with Utah in the Pac-12. Those are the three football powerhouses, the three teams capable of winning national championship, not nationals a little lofty. Let me check myself there, of winning Pac-12 championships and making college football runs, because the playoff is changing for the next couple of years. So if they're in it, that's where I said I still would like Utah to be there. And that's why if they would leave, then it's like, well, there's no one here as much anymore, right? I have a lot of respect for Washington State and Oregon State. In fact, you see the final segment, What to Make of College Football Today. I'm going to talk specifically about those fan bases. And I feel bad that Oregon State's going through this, because their program is on the rise right now. They're in a really strong position. I think Coach Dickert and what he's doing at Washington State is also putting them in a stronger position too. So it sucks that they could be without a Power 5 conference just because of kind of everything going on with the TV deals and everything right now. Just as someone who, once again, grew up watching and enjoying Pac-12 football, this is where it's a bummer in my opinion. But if Arizona State does decide to stay in the Pac, and then let's say that would be 9, so you go get San Diego State, that's where once again I think Utah should stay. And I think that would just make a lot of sense for Utah, as I kind of laid out too, because I just feel like that access to the playoff, you're set up for success going forward. I mean, I would love to know from you guys in the comments. Like, and yeah, I'll say Deion Sanders, Colorado, they have a chance to be really good, and they'll have a chance to I think they could actually win the Big 12. Like, that sounds crazy. I think 3 to 4 years from now, they could legitimately win the conference, because I think Deion is that good of a head coach. I shouldn't even say, I think Deion's a good head coach. I just say this. Deion's a really good recruiter. He's going to get really good recruits there. Therefore, I think he's going to be a contender at this level. But I do think it's going to take some time. Arizona, I like Coach Fish, but it's just really hard to win a conference championship. I mean, we saw how long it took Utah to break through. And I know Arizona has obviously been here, but it's a different transition, right? Going from one conference to the next and at the Power 5 level still. But once again, they're just building it up slowly but surely. But I'm not sure, again, that they're going to transform into something. It looks good on paper right now, but the games aren't played on paper. Things happen all the time. We've seen programs trend in the right direction and then fall off at the last second. I hope that doesn't happen in Arizona, but it still could. So that's where, to me, like I said, if you add San Diego State, I still think the Pac-12 can get themselves back to a solid image, but they're obviously not going to make as much in the media deal. And if that's what is most important, the money aspect of this, and I understand if it is, because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, $31 million. And it's what the schools have been making. Instead, you go down to 20 for your media rights deal. That's where it just changes everything. And that's, like I said, why I understand why Utah will then go. And if that's what they decide to do, and I'll say this too, obviously I've been someone saying Utah's going to stay in the Pac. I have no problem admitting I'm wrong. I've never had a problem admitting I'm wrong. I thought Utah would stay in the Pac. They very well may go. But once again, nothing is signed and set in stone. So that's why I am operating what I feel like is the responsible thing to do with this platform that I'm lucky to have, and not go Utah to the Big 12 is a done deal, because it's not. It seems like, if we're doing odds at this point, probably seems like the most likely, right? I don't know. Some part of me still, like I said, I think it's a bias to me, still hopes that Utah ends up in the Pac-12, but it's not final. So until it's final, I'm not going to come on here and be like, yep, done deal, like do all that. I know in the comments I get called delusional, but I just, once again, I'm not going to react to something that isn't finalized. Seems likely. Absolutely. I think it definitely does at this point that Utah will end up in the Big 12, but just not a final thing. So that's where I'm staying there. And I think the final scenario that we should bring up is if something changed and Arizona did decide to go back to the Pac, and that the meeting they have tomorrow morning scheduled, in which they're going to try to salvage the conference, basically. Ross Dellinger reported, meanwhile, Pac-12 leaders have now held positive meetings the last 2 days to examine details of the Apple deal. Presidents of schools whose membership is in question participated. A grant of rights was expected to be presented to presidents at a meeting Friday. Not sure if that still will be based on the wordage of that Dellinger used there, because I think he recognizes that the situation has now changed because obviously what happened? Arizona more than likely is not going to be involved in that meeting unless something else crazy happens. So once again, we're just something to continue to monitor the situation. I'm checking one last time for you guys. Like I said, it's 11:09 now. I checked one last time to see if there was any news on this Board of Regents meeting, but nothing's happened yet. Next, but once again, yeah, if Arizona decide to stay at the last second, Utah, the Pac-12 would then be at I think I said with the Arizona State one, they'd actually be at 8. So I actually miscalculated my numbers there. But either way, you expand, add an SMU, Arizona State, you can be fine.
We interrupt this podcast to give you a brief message about one of the sponsors of today's episode, eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to the My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right fit, the right parts, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So make sure you guys head over to eBay Motors to get the parts you guys need today for some great deals. Now, back to the episode.
So once again, if Arizona decide to come back, then yeah, I still think Utah should come back. Really hinges on Oregon and by extension, Washington. I think that's what Canzano said, right? If Oregon goes, that everyone else is going to kind of go like that. And just because I said Oregon's just a very strong football program, I want to stay in the conference with very strong football programs. So and the Big 12 has them as well. So that's where I'm okay going there. But I just think Oregon is set up for to be a little bit better right now than some of those programs in the Big 12. I expect if Oregon were in the Big 12, I think they would consistently be the best football program there. That might be a hot take, but I expect now that Dan Lanning's there and Mario Cristobal was there when he was there as well, they were rolling. I expect Oregon to continue to be a top 10 team in college football. I think the Big 12 will continue to do kind of what's happened to them. They'll have a year where they are, and then they'll have a year where they aren't. Kind of like what we expect to happen with TCU this year, right? So that's where it's going to be very interesting to see. But just to tie one big bow around this whole conversation, there's a lot of scenarios. There's a lot of potential things that could happen in college football in the next earlier this week. I even had a video like the next 48 hours are critical for Utah. And I think, nothing as final has happened, but the events that have happened with Arizona, everything that's kind of started to trickle down. This is what I was talking about when I published that episode, saying this would determine Utah's future and I'll actually be wrong if Utah ends up staying in the Pac-12, right? Because all the dominoes that have started to fall seem to indicate and direct that Utah is going to end up in the Big 12. And we've heard reports like that they originally didn't want to. I mean, 2 weeks ago from when you guys will be listening to this, Mark Harlan was on a stage with Commissioner Koliakoff, and he said that was just speaking about his belief in the Pac-12 and everything that was going on and Commissioner Koliakoff's vision and yada, yada, yada. And it just didn't come to fruition, obviously. I think that's what they genuinely believed at the time. But even back then, it seemed like they were going to get a better media rights deal, right? I mean, obviously, Commissioner Koliakoff did. Why else would he go on stage and then say, the longer we wait, the better the deal gets, which it's obviously not the case. When you got 2 schools, one for sure, and then potentially 2 with what could happen with Arizona leaving the conference. So once again, just putting a bow on the whole thing. It seems like with the way things are trending in the direction, Utah will very likely end up in the Big 12. I still think there's a chance they end up in the Pac. I hope they end up in the Pac still, like I said, just for being a traditionalist of college football and wanting the teams to stay together and not wanting it to fall apart. And once again, to me, it really does hinge on an Oregon and Washington, because I just think the conference can survive losing Arizona and Arizona State if they act quickly with conference realignment and just bringing in some of those San Diego State, SMU. But I also understand if Utah thinks they can't, and they're like, we got to take the money at this point because we're never going to see it if we don't. And that's where it would make sense to me to follow and go to the Big 12. So lots of crazy stuff. Let me know what you guys think is going to happen with Utah. Where do you want to see them go? Most of you in my comments want to see them go to the Big 12. It definitely seems like, but if there are any of you who still want them to stay in the Pac, would love to see that as well. So last thing I do want to end on is what to make of college football today. This is just the bummer part of it to me. I just, like I said, it just bums me out. I mean, I saw a huge post. I want to say it was by Reddit College Football, just talking about how his love for college football was shaped kind of by Washington growing up and how that kind of changed when the Washington, the Pac-12 and everything, and how their brands kind of evolved and everything. And now it's just drastically changed. And now it's just, it looks like that we don't know what's going to happen with Washington State, Oregon State, Cal Stanford in this group as well, although there's rumors about them in the Big Ten. Just like how the conference is dying. It's just a bummer to see. Like for those of us who woke up and were looking forward to Pac-12 football, that's not a thing anymore. It's a bummer that Oregon and Washington State have to lose out on a ton of money when their programs are still trending in the right direction to me, especially in Oregon State with what they have going on. So that's the part that is kind of a bummer. I mean, this whole situation, right? I mean, people could lose their jobs out of this. So that's obviously a big bummer. Not a lot of people will be fine, but a lot of them won't be. All the local media will be good, but and media in general will be fine. But like the Pac-12 workers and different things like that, sure, maybe they'll land on their feet and get another job, but doesn't mean they won't have to look. How about all the talented people at the Pac-12 network? If this all falls apart, I mean, most of them will go somewhere else, but this is the things you just don't know what's going to happen. And I'm going to miss seeing them cover Pac-12 football, just as once again, someone who really enjoyed the conference. So that's where it's just a bummer to me that this is the world it's kind of turned into. We all love college football because of, especially compared to the NFL, right? I think what I find in talking to most people about why they love the college game and not the NFL is it was in the past just like, oh, you're playing for your school, you're playing for your teammates. Like it wasn't as much as about the money, and that's really changed now, right? Between NIL, which is I want athletes to get paid. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying we see guys like only making decisions based on the amount of NIL money, where it was like that was supposed to be. And I also always thought NIL was best as a tool to get paid for your talents you produce at the college level. You know, now it's just in kind of an arms race in some ways for high school athletes. And I'm glad those high school athletes can get paid to support it. But once again, it's just one of the things that it's kind of changed the sport, right? It's more like the NFL now, where it's more like free agency. Whoever can spend the most on some of these recruits is going to get them. There's still some guys who are going to pick the best fit for them, and that's totally fine. But I just like that we had the difference with the two leagues. And yeah, as I mentioned, it's just it's really changed. And I think it's a lot of ways for the worst with kind of the way the greed has entered it. And you see conferences being pulled and taken apart, and people are going to be affected by that in a negative way. Some in a positive, maybe. As I said, maybe this will be good for Colorado. Maybe it'll be good for Arizona. Maybe it'll be good for Utah to go to the Big 12. I just don't know. I just, yeah, like I said, I think it's kind of a bummer that we're in the situation where Pac-12 schools are being left behind, conferences are being torn apart. People could potentially be missing out on jobs. And I don't think I'm alone in saying that I don't love the direction that college football is in right now, where it's the TVs markets have all of the, or TV stations, just saying like TV companies have all the power basically. That's not why I tune in. I tune in for the athletes and to enjoy the games and everything like that. And now it's all about where the games are being played. When I just, like I said, I mean, I just tune in for good games each week outside of when I watch Utah. So going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Depending on the news we get, I'm going to say it's likely that I will drop a Saturday show. So be on the lookout for that, you guys. But really appreciate all of your support this week. I know most of you, or not me, I shouldn't say most, but I know a lot of people from the Big 12 have come over just to kind of dump on the concept. But either way, this was the best week we ever had on Locked On Utes by a mile. I mean, every video, I think one is teetering on, and we'll see how this does tomorrow. But my last 4 videos have all done around 3,000 views wise, which is, like I said, just incredible. So I really appreciate those of you guys who have listened and supported the content all week. Even if some of you just came in to dump on me, you still watched and listened. So I just appreciate that in general. But once again, appreciate all of you for watching and listening all week. More than likely, we'll see you on Saturday, but if not, we'll see you on Sunday. If you guys are in the market for a second listen every day, make sure you guys check out the Locked On Pac-12 podcast, where Spencer McLaughlin does a great job breaking everything down for you as well. And just check out the other Locked On hosts, see how they're feeling about this whole situation. And once again, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. And we'll be talking about how it all played out on a future episode of Locked On Utes, potentially Saturday. So we'll see you next time.